Thank you. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Board of Selectmen meeting, Tuesday, November 26th, 6:30 p.m. at the McAuliffe Hearing Room at the Townhouse. Before we get started with the agenda items, I just wanted to make note, on Sunday morning last week, we all woke up to the news of the passing of former board member Brian Schifrin. This is our first meeting since his passing, and I just wanted to take an opportunity to say a few words. Brian and Christine moved to town about 17 years ago, and soon after, Brian began his service to our community on the Recreation Commission. Over his time in town, Brian gave of himself on the Recreation Commission, SHOPSI, Affordable Housing Trust Fund Committee, Community Preservation Committee. He was a commissioner of the Southborough men's softball, Little League coach, St. Mark's Golf Course Master Planning Committee, and most recently as a member of the Board of Selectmen, serving until May of this year. Brian was a strong advocate for all groups to work together, always in a way that was respectful of everyone's positions. I look back at the open letter to the town that Brian wrote as he ran for selectman, and in his letter he noted his proven track record of collaboration and responsible decision-making, traits that would be critical to the board in the coming years. He also stated that he was passionate about public service. These humble words are an understatement to Brian's involvement and his ability to work cooperatively with all and work towards building consensus. The number of people he touched in his 17 years in town was clearly evident by the vast number of people who attended his services both Monday and Tuesday of last week. We all learned of his diagnosis as he was running for the position of selectman in the fall of 2017, and he bravely made the decision to again put town service first. He stayed in the race and won. The town was a beneficiary of his service not only to this board, but to the numerous boards and committees he did serve on. He was a great friend, will be missed. Our sympathies go out to Christine, Courtney, and Charlie, and all the members of Brian's and Christine's families. Please join me now in a moment of silence as we remember and honor Brian. Thank you all very much. I'm going to go on to 6:30 p.m. hearing, National Grid petition to locate wires and ducts at 48 Main Street, Fay School. Mr. Purple.
Mr. Chairman, the Southborough Board of Selectmen hold a public hearing on Tuesday, November 26th at 6:30 p.m. in the McAuliffe Hearing Room at the Southborough Townhouse, 17 Common Street, Southborough, Mass. To consider a petition by Mass Electric Company, National Grid, to locate wires and ducts across the public way from pole 25 to transformer at 48 Main Street, Fay School Dining Hall. All interested parties are encouraged to attend. Southborough Board of Selectmen, November 5, 2019.
Great, thank you. Is there anybody here from National Grid? Sir, if you could just come up and sit at a microphone.
Al Galvin, design engineer, National Grid.
Great, thank you. I guess, sorry you needed to follow that moment of silence. We certainly appreciate your continuance of the hearing to tonight from
Sure.
last week. So
Sure.
we certainly appreciate that. So I don't know if there's anything that you just wanted to give us a brief update on this project.
No, it's pretty straightforward. They the state went ahead and put the conduit in, so it's already done. I guess the road was being worked on at the time, so they wanted to get on that so it didn't have to be redug up at a later date or anything like that. We still need to run our wires at a later date, but it's all being prepped for that three-phase power to the dining hall for the school. So, yeah.
Very good. Any questions on the board? Ms. Braccio.
Hi, just one quick question, thank you. In the documentation, you're looking for permission to excavate the public highways. That's already been done, correct?
Yes, yeah, they put in the 4-inch concrete encased conduit already. Yep.
Okay, just wanted to verify, thank you.
Mr. Stivers.
Just to follow up on Ms. Braccio's question, this to me looks like there's really no impact on the town from this. The work has been done in terms of the roadway, et cetera.
Yeah,
so
it's
the
already
rest
been
of
done.
it
They
is
just have to upgrade that street pole.
basically
to,
the pole and the stuff on the Fay property, so
Exactly.
no impact at all on the town from what I can
No,
see here.
from
Is
what
that correct?
From what I understand, it's all been done already.
Okay, thank you.
I have nothing. Nothing. Okay. Anybody from the public? Mr. Litt?
Tim Litt, Woodland Road. Not particularly specific to this, but on these approvals in general, I think it would be worth making them, subject to not blocking any existing or future sidewalk opportunities for the town. As these things involve putting in poles and transformers and stuff, as the town is trying hard to become a complete streets place, it would be good to avoid obstacles.
Thank you. Other comments?
Brian, just quickly to respond to that. I mean, this is an issue that came up peripherally when we were looking at the Main Street project, and the timing worked out well, because while the street was being ripped up, and there are, of course, sidewalks that are going in there, and nothing that's been done with respect to that, to that project impacts what's going to be happening with the sidewalks on both sides of the street, right near where the conduit is in.
Right, only that pole 25 that needs to be upgraded is the only change on the street.
Yeah, so I think it's a reasonable point. It was something, again, that was peripherally part of, I don't even want to say our consideration. We knew it was likely to happen. But the sidewalks on Main Street, where this is going to be, are, knock on wood, going in next spring.
Yeah, I'm just concerned generally because, either poles or guy wires or transformers or whatever happens. I just thought I'd take the opportunity to make sure that as this and future applications come before you for these things that have typically just been routine, that this is on your checklist of, how you approve them.
Thanks. Any other comments? Is there a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Second.
Moved, seconded. All those in favor of closing the public hearing?
Aye.
Any other discussion? Is there a motion?
I'll move to approve the request by National Grid to petition wires and ducts at 48 Main Street, Fay School.
Second.
Moved, seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Passes unanimously.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, I want to go to the joint meeting with the Library Board of Trustees. Is everybody ready for the recommended appointment? So we have first the a joint meeting with the Library Board of Trustees, purpose of which is to fill the vacancy on the board. We had received correspondence from Mr. Donovan, the library director, on a recommendation. Trustee, are all the trustees here? Do you have a quorum to call yourselves to order, or? Yeah, okay, very good. So I know you folks had met with all the candidates. I don't know if you want to give a brief update to us on your recommendation for the appointment.
Okay, should I do it from the floor?
You need to be at a microphone, either at the table here or at the podium, whichever is more convenient for you.
Okay, Marguerite Landry, I'm the chair. We met, we had several candidates. We had them attend a meeting. We spoke to them all. They asked us questions. After that, there was a vote of the trustees, and we selected Amy Yazdani, and that's our recommendation that we're putting forward.
Thank you. Any questions, comments from the board?
I don't have any.
I don't either, thank you.
No?
I did hear at least some of those interviews, and I concur in that choice. Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you.
all right. Is there a motion?
And I'm ready to second.
All right, I move to make the recommended appointment by the Board of Trustees.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Now, do
Aye.
we all have to vote? The library has to vote too, right?
Yes.
Library trustees, so. Everybody all in. Recorded.
So how many members do we have of the Board of Trustees? 1, 2, 3, 4.
One of us is home with a sick child.
Okay, so did I count 5?
The other one's
Okay.
the candidate who's here.
Okay, you can't vote yet.
So we have a quorum, yes.
Okay.
Okay,
Motion
Again,
passes.
so
Gotta
it
make a
passes.
motion.
Oh, so I move that we appoint Amy Estani as our interim trustee. All those in favor?
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, that passes. And congratulations, Amy.
Congratulations.
I think, right?
Next, Mr. Donovan, do you want to continue with your update?
Sure. So I was going to come at this time of year anyway, just to talk a little bit about the strategic plan, which in of itself probably was not a presentation. But Vanessa had asked that I give an update on one of the grants the library received. And actually, the library's received a number of grants. So I wanted to just give sort of an overview, because some of that is new stuff the library is still integrating, and I think it's sort of worth highlighting, you know, who has been generous to the library, to thank those people, and to talk a little bit about what we're doing moving forward. So thank you for this opportunity. So, hello, I am Ryan Donovan, the director of the Southborough Library. This past September, the Board of Trustees approved a new 5-year strategic long-range plan for the library. Over 500 Southborough residents contributed feedback to this effort. I would personally like to thank everyone that came to a planning forum, a focus group, or completed the library's community survey last fall. Primary planning goals from the new strategic plan include the following: marketing and promoting library services by better advertising and promoting existing library programs across all ages. For the library to increase the variety of programs and library hours by aiming programs at underserved age populations, specifically young adults and seniors. And to strengthen and improve the library facility by exploring future state design and construction grants. Copies of the plan, which I know you all want, are available in print on the back table tonight, and the plan is always available on the Southborough Library's website in the About section, which we're seeing on the screen right now. One area of feedback focus in particular was on library programs. A recent Boston Globe article by John Hilliard highlighted the growing importance and use of library programs across Massachusetts. Please allow me to take this opportunity to thank several local, state, and federal sources of grant funding for programs at the Southborough Library. In May of this year, the Choate Recreational Fund awarded the library nearly $1,400 to purchase an outdoor chess set for public use. This helped to augment several new indoor drop-in chess programs that the library started last year and was a big hit with residents walking by. I'm sure you've either seen it or heard about it. The Southborough Cultural Arts Council has funded 2 great programs this year already: a vision board creation workshop and a series of 4 ballroom dancing lessons in June. We thank the council for their continued investment in the library and hope that they will fund 4 new programs totaling over $1,000 in the next year. Examples of these events include informational talks on superfoods and aromatherapy. The Massachusetts Board of Library Commissioners recently awarded us $15,000 from the Federal Library Services and Technology Act. This grant is for an idea lab in our brand new teen space. The new state-of-the-art technology in this space will help young adults achieve results with a multitude of different design projects. What you're seeing right now is our inaugural 3D printing job, so we took a quick little video. The teen room is open now, and we hope to have the new Idea Lab up and running in early January of next year. But we got the 3D printer working yesterday, I'm happy to say, and you can see that cute little frog in the bottom corner. As part of their Projects Grant program, the Mass Cultural Council has awarded the library a matching grant of $2,500 to support public programming in the arts, humanities, and interpretive sciences. This money will be used to expand the middle grade crafternoon after-school programs in March through June 2020. Special thanks to resident Betsy Rosenblum, who worked as a volunteer to help me research and write this crucial grant, who I did not know would be here tonight, but she's sitting in the back, so thank you, Betsy. Since the Mass Cultural Council grant was a matching grant, we also needed to find more funding through other sources. The local Southborough Community Fund will also support the Crafternoon series. Their contribution will help fund 4 new and distinct craft programs in January and February 2020. We would like to sincerely thank the Southborough Community Fund and their parent community foundation, the Foundation for Metro West. The Friends of the Southborough Library have contributed, the Friends of the Southborough Library have continued to provide the library with generous financial support for programs. They made up the difference for the matching grant from the Mass Cultural Council, and then some. The Friends have pledged over $1,800 in support of the Crafternoons this year alone. The Friends' continued support of children's programming in 2019 totals well over $4,000. They have also funded several new adult programs and will purchase several new items for the Idea Lab in the teen room. Without Friends of the Library funding support for programs and the library's popular museum passes, we would not be able to offer these services to the public. Just in July through September of this year, the library has hosted over 100 programs with attendance totaling over 1,600 people. To quote the Globe article, libraries serve as a gateway to a wider community. As one patron put it, I think libraries will always be a touchstone for our society. Their services will never go away. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions, comments from Mr. Donovan?
You always kid me that I steal your thunder, so I'm letting you go first tonight.
All right, that's fine. I just wanted to say, great presentation, Ryan. Congratulations to the library, to the trustees, and the Friends. I mean, this is really great. I mean, the library is such a focal point in the community with all the different programs you run, as well as all the informational things you do at night. I know there's lots of great things for pollinators and whatnot that you guys have done, and you've always been receptive. So kudos to you. Keep up the great work, and the library truly is a focal point of the town, so thank you.
A couple of things really quick. I learned something. I walk by the chess set 4 or 5 times a week with my dog, and now I know I can touch it. I've looked at it and wondered. So that is great news, and I'll keep the dog away from it.
Does your dog play?
No, yeah.
We did have to put it away for the winter, but it will be back next spring.
Oh, okay.
So just,
All right.
we couldn't have frozen chess pieces. So.
Okay. The information about the grants is great. Can you just describe what your process is? And I don't want to steal. I know this has been one of your items, Mr. Stivers. But what the process is? You said you worked with Ms. Rosenblum about it. How do you go about identifying potential grants and then working through the application process?
So, I mean, the Crafternoons are sort of the best example because I think we have 3 different funding sources for what's going on right now. It was really about seeing available grant opportunities that are there and fitting them with what the library is doing and how to augment that. You know, we wanted to do more Crafternoons, but we simply didn't have funding for that. So the grants allow us to go to 2 of them a month. I mean, we don't even do it every week. But I think I do many things at the library, and it's difficult to try to identify all the grants that could help us, but I try to carve out time just to sort of research grants and find grants that I think could not only aid what we're doing, which has been my focus right now, but also look a little bit to the future. And one of the grants we're looking to actively pursue next year would be something that helps us do sort of garden spaces at the library. That's a new initiative that the MBLC has starting, and we're looking to start a seed exchange at our location in March. So I think that is that's something that's going to be very popular, and we're already kind of thinking 2 steps ahead. Like, let's make a space at the library where people could take the seeds and then grow them. But I don't have any sort of infrastructure for that. I don't have ways to purchase the materials or even some of the seeds that we don't get that are donated that we'd like to offer. So, you know, we've been working with the Open Space Preservation Commission. We're working with the Southborough Gardeners. We're working with any group that wants to partner on this, but we're also looking at available grants. So.
Okay, one of the things that's been floated or discussed here, and I suspect your answer to my question is going to be yes, but I'll ask it anyway. And that is, would it be beneficial to the library if there were a resource, not dedicated entirely to the library, but someone who was responsible for researching grants at the town level, including for the library level, and being able to identify them and help write up the grants? I suspect the answer is yes, that would be something that's beneficial.
Absolutely, but researching, writing, and sort of pursuing grants is part of my job description. So, it's something I would be open to working with anybody on. Betsy was nice enough to donate her time when she had some over the summer to sort of do some of the research that I just didn't have time to do. So, I look for anybody that can aid, or even proofreaders before you send something off is helpful. If it was somebody that would pursue a grant on behalf of the library, that is something I would be open to having a discussion about.
Mr. Healy, I think the town of Hopkinton has someone they hired last year or the year before who does that across the board for all the departments, a grant writer.
Okay, great.
I think it'd be great.
And the only other thing is, you mentioned the programs. I guess my first question is, do you, 100 plus is, kudos to you folks for doing that. Is there is your ability to put on programs limited in any way by space or otherwise, or is that not an issue? Or are you pretty comfortable with the fact that if you want to do a program, you've got the physical resources to be able to do it?
Yes, some programs are cost prohibitive.
Okay.
I can't fund everything we'd like to do.
Okay, and the second thing is, and I think it's, if my memory is serving correctly from reviewing this, one of the things that's in our materials for tonight has to do with Verizon, and the idea that they're going to, there's a possibility for live programming from the library. Number one, I guess, are you aware that that's a possibility?
That's something I requested.
Okay,
so
well,
that way, we've never had the ability to broadcast Candidates Night live, and that has been, we get calls every year, actually, of people who say, can I turn on the cable station and see what's going on? And I think Terry and Trevor have had to sort of edit it, they drop everything else they're doing to get that uploaded so people can watch it right away. I think we'd like the opportunity, like the Board of Selectmen meetings, to be able to broadcast live, specifically for that event, but I think there are applications for other things we do too.
Terrific. That's all for me, except that you have my permission to get rid of last year's candidates tape, if you like.
All right. I'm sure Candidates Night would outdraw the Super Bowl in terms of viewership, but very riveting experience. First, great presentation. Thank you. Delighted to hear about all the programs. And as Marty mentioned, we have talked about a part-time grant writer position, maybe to help a number of town organizations be more focused and effective in terms of getting grant funding, which is critical. I also would observe that I'm delighted to see the disrepair on Corderville Road across from the library. Those strips across the road, I'm assuming, are drainage pipes going into the drainage system. They finally get the drainage problem fixed there as part of the new process. So that's very good news, and hopefully that will deal with the 100-year rains that we get every 2 or 3 years now. So my fingers are crossed.
We didn't have any water in the library this weekend,
Fantastic.
and Kim and I were checking.
Watching closely,
So.
thank you. And just finally, I continue, as you know, to be a strong supporter of the library. I think you folks do a great job. And really, but for education purposes, it's important, but I think for social purposes, it's more important, frankly. Opportunity to draw people who might not connect with one another in town, but have common interests in things, whether it's the poetry club or the chess club or whatever. Lots of people, I think, find ways to connect with their friends and neighbors and build new relationships through those kind of programs. I think that's a critical function that we need to figure out ways to do more of beyond the library. So I applaud you for doing those kind of things as well, and hope that will continue and grow in the future. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much for coming. Thanks for your presentation.
Thank you.
All right, appreciate it.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for your support.
Next, Mr. Rubenstein, Cable Committee, the presentation of the Verizon Renewal Cable Agreement. It is.
Is this
Mary,
going to
how are
take
you?
2 hours?
Yeah. Welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Barry Rubenstein, Chair of the Cable Television Committee. Before I start, I'd like to acknowledge the other members of our small but feisty group. You have Kathy Willett over there and Will Warren over here. Some of you may remember that I was here about 10 months ago to get your approval for terms we were hoping to negotiate with Verizon on the renewal of their cable television license, which expired on May 12th. I had hoped to be back much sooner than this, but here we are, and I think we have achieved pretty much everything that we hoped to achieve. Let me just briefly run through the significant pieces of it. We had, and we do plan to negotiate 10-year licenses with all of the providers, but we knew going in that Verizon has not done more than a 5-year license in more than 2 years. So we knew that they were only going to agree to 5 years. On the capital funding piece, for reasons that I'll get to, we actually obtained significantly more than not only Sam's budget called for, but that we requested in the negotiation. So we'll get $95,000, and not only is it more, it's payable more quickly than generally is the case and that we anticipated. So that, I think, was a big win for us. On the operational funding, all of our current agreements provide operational funding at a level of 4% of gross revenues. We sought to increase that to 5% to support Sam's budgets. Verizon was amenable to that with the proviso that, and again, this is in every Verizon license in the Commonwealth, they will go to 5%, and in this case, when Charter, whose license is up next year, goes to 5%. They just insist on a level playing field, so they had no objection to the 5%, but will only go to 5% when we get it from Charter. One of the things you just mentioned, and was important, I know, to Mark and to others in the town, was to broaden the facilities in which we can broadcast live. So we've added the new public safety building as well as the library as facilities from which Sam can do live broadcasts. In addition, going forward, Sam, if it chooses, will be able to add an HD channel. The only real point of disagreement between the parties was over Verizon's request that we have an early termination provision. Their proposal was that they could terminate the license at their sole discretion at any time on 60 days' notice. We objected to that on a number of bases, one of which being that it was not fair to subscribers because if suddenly Verizon pulled the plug, it's not clear that 60 days was enough time for everyone to migrate to Charter or Comcast. But the other concern we had was the loss of revenue. If they pull the plug, then Sam loses that money right away. So we pushed back on all of those grounds, and ultimately they were willing to make several concessions. One was they can only pull the plug if 8.5% of subscribers in any 12-month period, net 8.5%, drop their subscriptions. Secondly, instead of 60 days, it's 180 days notice, which we think is adequate time to allow people to move. And while the original proposal on capital funding would have been paid out over 5 years, they agreed and would have been split up between a guaranteed amount of $50,000 and then a percentage of gross revenue, which we know is going to go down over time as more people cut cords. They were able to not only guarantee the full amount, but pay it in the first 12 months of the agreement, meaning there's no way they're going to get out of paying that 95%. So, after review, the Cable TV Committee has recommended to this board that you approve this license. I should mention that I have consulted with the SAM board, and they are in agreement that the license should be approved. Be happy to answer any questions.
So, first of all, for me, thank you to all of you for the hard work that you put into this. I know that you did a lot. You did a lot of outreach, you know, starting 10 months ago to solicit input from people in town on this, and I think you've brought back an excellent deal for the town. I know on a personal level, my daughters are very, very excited about seeing me in high definition, but most importantly, in all seriousness, I'm just very glad that the funding was put in place for SAM, because I know that was a concern with the way that things were progressing in the industry, that some of that funding might be cut. I think that would have resulted in us taking a giant step backwards in being able to show meetings like this, showing a number of public events, public meetings to those who aren't able to attend in person. So particularly on that note, I'm very pleased to see that the SAM funding is what it will be in the agreement.
Thanks very much for that and for the hard work. I was in here 10 months ago, so I'm going to ask you just a few questions. So with this, then we'd have, obviously the townhouse has got live capability. Trottier?
Terry can answer that.
Yeah, thumbs up on
Yeah.
Trottier.
And Senior Center,
The senior center does?
Yeah.
They do? Okay. I guess I've never seen one live from there. Okay. And then so we'd be at 5 locations then with this? Or is there a 6th that I'm not aware of? The Art Center? South Union. It's up on a hill. Okay, yeah.
But it's just a connection from the wall, so we can't put all the graphics in, it's just a connection to the wall.
Okay,
So limited.
okay, so limited,
there.
okay, all right. In terms of the operational funding, what is it, what is the 4% of gross revenue or 5%? Do you know what that translates into roughly per year? A dollar figure?
well, at 4%, it's currently generating about $144,000. The Verizon piece generates about $144,000.
And so this would, whatever the math is, it would go up that
It'd go up
25% or so.
25%.
Yeah, okay, great. And then in terms of discussions with Charter and Comcast, because that's obviously going to have some effect, just a notion of what a timetable is likely for that, or?
It's very hard to predict. I would have never said that to achieve this, it would take us the amount of time it took. So we're trying to get our council to start moving on making connections with Charter. The good news is pretty much their agreement is going to be driven by this agreement for a number of reasons. One is they have about 1/5 of the market share in Southborough that Verizon has. So we have a great deal of leverage in dealing with them. And I don't see any reason why they will put up a fight about 5%, recognizing that this is not coming out of their pocket. They pass this charge along to subscribers. So it's a competitive thing as long as they're not charging their subscribers more than Verizon is charging theirs. There's really no objection for them to raise to the 5%.
Okay, great. Thanks very much.
Ms. Braccio.
Thank you. I just wanted to thank you. I was here 10 months ago when we tasked you with this, and it was a very daunting task at the time. And I just have to tell you, an outstanding job to all of you to come back with this. This is such an excellent contract to bring back to the town. You should all be very proud of the job that you did, because I'm sure that it wasn't exceptionally easy. It's never easy to negotiate with, outside contractors like that. So again, kudos to all of you, and thank you.
I'd add that SAM funding has always been very important to me, so on several levels. But, The, the expectation is that, again, the other deals with other carriers will fall into line with this. No likely significant changes as far as you can tell.
No, I'm fairly confident we will be able to get a 10-year agreement with Charter. They are doing 10. In fact, they just did 15 with a town. So the good news with that is, and I should say about the early termination provision, which I really have no concerns about for a number of reasons. One is we're sort of an early adopter of that. We're one of the first towns that they forced that on. Although Boston has had that provision since 2016, and it's currently going in Lawrence and some others. But the only reason they would exercise that is if they're going to get out of the cable TV business. And there's no point in them getting out of the cable TV business in Southborough if they still have licenses with all the other towns, or most of the other towns in Massachusetts.
Right.
The other thing is, even if they did, we have 2 other cable providers here. So if people want cable, they can simply migrate to another provider, and it wouldn't necessarily result in a significant loss of revenue for Sam, because we will have gotten all of the capital piece, and the operational piece, the 5% will just, Charter's revenues will go up, and we'll get a bigger piece from Charter. So either way, I think we got a lot for giving up something that probably isn't going to impact us.
Good. And are there other things that other towns have negotiated that are not on the table at this point, that looking forward we may have some different asks next time around with this, or this is pretty much in the forefront of what the deals are looking like?
Yeah, I mean, Verizon has been the most aggressive, at least in Massachusetts, in negotiating these deals. Having said that, there's obviously a lot going on in the industry. I would assume you don't recall, one of the things I talked about 10 months ago was that the FCC was considering some regulations which would allow the providers to deduct the costs of providing free television to public buildings from the 5% gross revenue. So it would dramatically reduce what the towns actually get. The FCC has passed those regulations. So far, the cable providers, at least Verizon, has not done anything about it, but who knows what will happen in the future with that.
But we're set for the next time period here now, so.
We should be.
Good. Again, kudos to the committee. Complicated process, sounds like a great outcome. I think that funding for the Southborough Access Media is a critical event, and that, in my view, has opened up the public's eyes to a lot of things going on in town government that historically have been very difficult to see and figure out. And I don't know what the viewership numbers are for town meetings, but I think it's a great thing to have that out there for people to see what's going on in the various boards. So thank you very much again.
Mr. Purple.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to thank Barry and the other members of the committee. I mean, this is, really a great effort. And I think Barry's kind of underselling it a little bit in terms of some of the limitations, the things that you can get and the things that are achievable. And obviously your work with Attorney Hewig kind of laid that out for you. But, to go in and to get more than you anticipated coming out with, and really to get a better outcome in terms of the termination policy, I think is great. And having taken care of the big dog, so to speak, who holds the majority of the cable market in Southborough first, I think sets you up very well for the next 2 negotiations. I assume that those should go a lot quicker, and it is always helpful to have a completed agreement on the table to help you with the others. So kudos to the committee, and your efforts are well appreciated.
Thank you.
Great. So while the cable committee is still here, I'm going to jump ahead to consent agenda item E, or letter E. So I will move that we approve the Verizon renewal cable agreement. Moved, seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Passes unanimously.
Thank you very much.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much to everybody. Next, William Signs, ADA Committee, warrant article request. Good evening, welcome.
Good evening, sir. We are here this evening to ask for your advice and consent. We, in an effort to do that, what we have done is constructed what I believe you have in front of you, which is a warrant article. That warrant article is to do a couple of things. It's to outline what we think our charter should be, and we need your agreement on that. And secondly, if in fact that there is an agreement on that, what we're interested in doing is making sure that the next folks, as there will be on these various committees, fully understand their set of responsibilities, et cetera. And so that's the nature of why we want the warrant article. Maybe to phrase or to put this into context, I can give you a little bit of background if you'd like that.
Sure.
One of the things that certainly I did when we joined this, when I joined this committee was took the name of the committee to be the charter. And so one of the first things we did, and probably the only thing we did for about an hour was to, or for about a year, was to focus on something called 502 CMR, which is the state's version of the federal ADA law. We found, among other things, that it applied to several things that we were required to deal with and that were brought to our attention. It also covered several things that seemed to be broader than some of the issues that I think we had initially heard or had discussed. But at the same time, we had brought to our attention various things that dealt with disabilities that were not covered in the ADA rules. And those things dealt with a number of things: visual issues, auditory issues, as well as architectural access issues, which is what the 501 CMR basically deals with. So it was a whole broad set of issues. We were, at that particular time, concerned, confused, and wondering whether, in fact, we should take on some of those issues. We decided to do that, but we're continued to be uncertain as to whether, in fact, it was our full responsibility. What you will see on the proposed warrant article are a list of additional things that we think are important for those in town that are disabled in one form or another. We're not talking about senior citizens exclusively. It covers a whole broad range of individuals. All voters, many. Some are children, but many of them are voters. And they want access to the public space, whether that's public space in terms of recreational, playgrounds, et cetera, or buildings, or whatever that issue happens to be. They would like to see or participate, but in some cases they find it difficult to do that. And so what we would like to do is begin to open up the town space to these individuals. And as I say, we kind of need a broader scope than I think we, or at least I, had perceived initially was our set of responsibilities. We have run that particular warrant article as a charter by a state individual who comes out here. He is specifically by name Jeff Dugan. He's the Assistant Director of Community Services with respect to the Massachusetts Office on Disability. Mr. Purple, Lori, among other things, were at this particular meeting. And he took a look at our particular proposal here, the warrant article, as a charter. And he was, I think Mark will agree, I think he was impressed by it. I think he thought it was comprehensive. And he thought it was something that we as a committee should undertake. We, therefore, based on all of those various things that we'd like to expand into, so to speak, would need, since you appointed us, we would like both your advice as to whether, in fact, that's appropriate, and your consent, if in fact you do think it's appropriate for us to get involved in some of these things. Now, one of the things I probably should point out are two things. One is that the warrant article that you have in front of you, and it is our intent to remain a committee, not a commission. We do not believe that we are going to get any things in terms of fines, fees, or any other types of revenues. That's not what we do. We will rely on the city to give us whatever budget they feel appropriate to make this happen. And I think in that respect, that organizational structure that we have really doesn't change very much. We have ex officio members, with Mark being one of the ex officio members. And our building commissioner, Lori Lavali, is another ex officio member. We have public meetings on a monthly basis. We have citizens who attend those particular meetings with us and voice concerns and are expressing just interest in general. So we would hope, and we think it would be good for the city if, in fact, this particular charter, as expressed in terms of this warrant article, was there. The reason the warrant article is in front of you is that, in fact, if in fact you approve it as a charter for us, that basically formalizes it so the next folks around understand precisely what is involved here. And the city can then therefore carry on. We believe that since we are not, we don't have enforcement responsibilities, we would choose not to do that as a committee. But we believe that we will have an ability to interact with regular meetings in front of yourself, for example, to discuss what we're up to and what our concerns are. We would also have the ability to interact with other commissions and committees within town to expand basically the idea of what assistance to people who are disabled are all about. Sometimes this gets forgotten in the heat of getting things done. So we simply want to be able to educate as much as possible and help other people understand what's happening. It makes good sense for the town in and of itself to do that because violations of various laws are serious. Sometimes immediate resolution is required, and it's expensive. If, in fact, we can put together, with a modest amount of money through a consultants of some kind, if we can put together a list of priorities and projects that we would like to see in town, there's a possibility, once that has been defined, rough estimates of monies are adjudicated, then in fact we can apply for grants and other assistance from the state to eliminate physical barriers and all sorts of other things. And therefore it is, it causes the town basically not to have to spend as much of its own taxpayer money, that is city taxpayer money, but we're able to get some assistance from the state. We would also be able to get assistance in this particular case from various individuals at the state who would be able to assist us in answering questions, evaluating various types of things. It just makes this particular charter would make our relationship with the state organizations more comfortable and more effective. And so I guess that's kind of the background that we're talking about here. That's why, after really fairly careful considerations, we pulled this particular document together. And actually, Mr. Litt, who was a public attendee of our meetings on occasion, helped us do that, helped us express our concerns. And I think it's been relatively effective, and I hope you will consider it a document you can support.
If
Very
I may
helpful.
add one other
Yes.
thing. I believe it was 1999, Mrs. Challen had all of our buildings reviewed as far as what the ADA compliance needs were. That hasn't been done since 1999. I was on the board back then with her. We feel strongly that the town's in a good position right now where we have sold our older buildings, and for the most part, we have new buildings, and we are looking at rehabbing or redesigning or adding to other buildings. We should take the opportunity to have the buildings evaluated for the needs, so we do not trigger a larger investment that we might not anticipate happening. Because you're only allowed 30% of the value of a building to add REN before you trigger 100% renovation. We are no longer grandfathered. We'd have to ask for waivers if we find that we are in non-compliance, and the state would have to hear that complaint or that waiver. They'd have to make a decision on. So we're just looking for support at this stage. There's opportunity to change the document before town meeting if necessary. Mr. Purple has been a great help. He's been appointed by you to assist us. We have a grievance policy now online, which hadn't been there for years. So we're moving forward, but we just need the public to know that we have your support before town meeting.
Very excellent presentation. And just administrative matter for the board. I don't know if everybody saw the email that came out this afternoon with a revised version of the document from the one that was in the packet. I don't know, have we all seen that or not?
You need a copy?
Yes, I've seen it.
I don't think I have, but I'm not sure that I necessarily need to, for some of the questions and comments I have. And you'll realize that when some of them are, I like to spend a lot more time with a document than I've had the opportunity to do so far.
No problem.
Do you want me to jump in, or you want to jump in first?
So, well, why don't you go first?
Okay.
And I'll,
All right, I mean, the idea, I mean, in terms of supporting the concept, the idea, that's an easy question. It's to make sure that the vehicle to get there is the right one. And so first of all, the process you are talking about is presenting it to us, hoping that the Board of Selectmen support both the concept and the warrant question itself, and then get it on the warrant for the 2020 town meeting. That's where we are?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
And furthermore, allow us, before town meeting, to begin to operate under this particular charter.
Okay. Then I'm going to address the document and the process. You may or may not, I mean, we just adopted, about a month ago, a policy for the town. And I think the process we went through for that was 4 different sort of readings and drafting. And the reason for that isn't that it's something we like to do, but it's you want to make sure, I mean, words are important.
Right.
And you want to make sure you get them right. And so just generally, that's a process. I appreciate you getting this to us, and it was in our packets for, at the end of last week. I have to tell you, for me, that's not nearly enough time for me to sit, digest, try to see how the various provisions fit together, and also how they fit together more generally with what the town's trying to accomplish. And I'll give you 2 examples of why I think it's important for this document. Number 1, the word shall appears a lot in this document. I mean, it's not a statute, it's not a regulation, but anytime the town adopts something with the word shall, you really have to think about it carefully, because it's got potential legal implications. And so that's something, and the shall's in here because someone could bring an action against the town and say, well, you didn't act, and you are required to. This is the document you adopted and you said you would, even if there's a perfectly reasonable reason why the town didn't act in a particular instance or otherwise. It's not a dangerous word, but it's a word that has import, and you have to think about it carefully. It appears a lot in this document. Secondly, you folks are all volunteers. Everybody who'd be involved with the Accessibility Compliance Committee Charter is a volunteer. And just taking a step back, there's a lot of work that I see that is included in this charter. And I just want to make sure, I don't think people are not capable of doing it, but I would just want to make sure that folks who are currently on the charter, on the compliance committee currently, but also thinking about looking forward, whether or not the responsibilities laid out in there are responsibilities that should be laid at the feet of an entirely volunteer enterprise. That's a concern of mine as well. So those are just 2, having had the opportunity for 4 or 5 days to take a look at that. So the concept makes great sense to me, but the document itself is not something I can support today, just because I need to spend a lot more time with it. Does that make
I don't
sense?
think we're here this evening to ask for support today. I think we're here to get a sense of the direction the board would like us to take this. I have asked Mr. Purple to see the town council review this, because I think there's some overlap as far as the responsibility of the school districts with some of what's in here, myself. And I've questioned some of the language also. I think it's a town council should have a review. The individual that's a paid employee that would be acting on behalf of the town would be your coordinator, who you appointed, which would be Mr. Purple and the building inspector. We do not have the responsibility to go out and, I don't believe we have the responsibility, I'll speak for myself, to go out and look for issues.
Or the skills, perhaps.
That's, I
Right.
hear you. That's
I
why you gotta be
believe-
very careful with
right.
the language.
I believe
Because
it-
I can read this in a way that gives you those responsibilities.
Right. That's why I suggested it go to town council. I also believe that it's not, we have a grievance process now that they didn't have until about 2 months ago, that Mr. Purple is responsible for that because of the confidentiality of it and everything. When Mr. Dugan was out to the senior center last week, he did bring to our attention, we do not have the new census, that over 30% of the residents of this town have a disability. So the 2020 census will tell us a different story, and we're just trying to be proactive. So I guess we're looking for guidance, how to get this to town meeting, answer some of the concerns you have, Mr. Healy, because I think some of us share some of those concerns, and where to delete something that is not under our jurisdiction. And I personally think the school issues do not belong with us. They're school committee issues.
Have you touched base with the school committee about those issues?
No, I'm only, as a former member of the school committee, I would think that would be outside of our jurisdiction
Yeah,
anyway.
okay. So those are my initial thoughts. I mean, I applaud the initiative. I think it's a great idea. I think it would be a good thing for the town to have for a lot of different reasons. Number one, it's the sort of thing that a town should have. But number two, just, I don't want to say from a liability standpoint, but from a structural standpoint about what our responsibilities are, I think it's a good idea. I appreciate the name of the gentleman from the state, and
Yes.
as is my want, I probably will try to touch base with him and talk a little bit. But that's my initial reaction to the document, much in the same way that I drafted up a document for the board to consider and was patted on the back and told it was a good start. And I think this is a very good start.
As long as we can have a placeholder for town meeting, because we have months before town meeting
Right.
occurs, and if it needs to be amended or changed, then I think that would be the opportunity that we could continue to correct this document, hoping for some success.
No, I agree with that, and, you know, I didn't think that we'd be in a position where we were ready to approve the language as written, but the concept is good, and I'd say that the advantage that we have on this potential warrant article is that it is written, it's on paper, it's ready for review, as opposed to a lot of others that have we believe will have placeholders that are currently still blank sheets of paper. So there's definitely that advantage. And I think it's very wise on the town's part to be as inclusive as possible with all that this committee does, as opposed to being limited, so.
Thank you.
Yeah, agree with all that, and I'll appreciate the answers, and I'm sure we're going to have more dialogue about this. Thanks.
Ms. Braccio.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. I also agree with what Brian and Marty had said. I have questions on the document. I think it's a great starting point, absolutely. I pulled up a few questions myself, so I'll reserve that for a later meeting or something, but I think it is a great start, and I think a placeholder would probably be a good place to start with this and going forward, so thank you.
Mr. Stivers?
I'll concur. Again, very supportive of the concept. I think it's time that we do this. I think that very helpful to understand sort of what's out there in terms of the things that we should be doing, we should be thinking about, et cetera. I think proactive, I heard, is an ideal word for this, in that it's helpful to know, what's out there in terms of any potential issues we need to deal with. And clearly, if somebody comes along, does an audit or whatever, I think we're much better off saying, yep, we have a plan for that, we know what it is, here's the plan to address it, versus, oops, we didn't even realize that was an issue. So I think it's very important. I guess I would say, I've had a chance to look at this. I think it's more than a starting point. I think it's in reasonably good shape, and I think there are some things that need to be done, and you've heard here there'll be some comments along the way. But I think it's important to get this on the fast track for consideration by town meeting. And I would hope that we would have a schedule to recycle on this fairly quickly and frequently, so we get it in decent shape so we can push on it for town meeting. Thank you.
So with that, I guess one thing that I would, recommend is, so the latest version of this is the one that was sent to us today, is the 0.6 version.
Correct.
So it would be my recommendation that at this point we put pens down on further modifications of this document. And this be the common version that everybody's looking at, just so that there aren't any other changes that one group is working on that one group is unaware of. So I think, just making sure that everybody's looking at the same document moving forward is the best approach.
Do you have a date on the top of yours?
11/24/19.
Yes.
Yep.
That's the most current document.
So, and again, that was emailed to the board earlier this afternoon. So I would just recommend that, I think would be wise for each of us to go through that document. And similar to, most of the documents that we work on, like we did for the policy that you had prepared and mentioned, Mr. Healy, to maybe use Mr. Purple as the conduit to receive all comments. Maybe we can have all those compiled into a next version.
Sure.
For discussion at an upcoming meeting. And I'll touch upon it in my chair report. But, while the warrant is open right now for the annual town meeting, it will be closing December 17th. So as a minimum, I think we ought, either next meeting or the meeting on the 17th, we ought to, be in a position, I think, where we're yay or nay on moving forward with at least keeping a placeholder for this, knowing that the final language for it will be resolved over the next couple months. Everyone in agreement with that approach?
Yes.
Yes.
Excellent. Okay.
Can I just get for Mr. Dugan, the name of the agency or office or department he's with?
Surely, we can give you his email too, if you'd like.
Oh, that'd be great.
Yeah.
Why don't you just do that? All right, terrific. Thanks.
If I may, so also questions that we have on the document, we'll also forward those to Mr. Purple as
Yeah, I
well?
think at this point, why don't we just,
Everything?
same way that we normally do things, channel it all through Mr. Purple, he can compile everything, get it to each of us, and
Okay.
we'll then have another common version of the document that we can continue discussions on.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate you coming.
I'm a guy who has been known to ask for forgiveness and not permission sometimes. Should we proceed with the concept that we have here in terms of our daily business for the next month or so?
How would that change how you're doing business?
It wouldn't.
It might
wouldn't.
not.
Then go ahead.
It might not, but if it does,
I'm sorry?
if it does, what happens? If someone raises an issue that, let's say, isn't 521 here.
I mean, procedurally, if the board wants to do that, also in your packet, there was what is called a charter. It's not a charter, it's a charge, which essentially would change the charge for the ADA committee at this point, which essentially puts them into the position that they would be after the bylaw is passed, should that go to town meeting.
So I
So
guess,
that's a consideration of the board. I mean, just if you're gonna if you're gonna allow them to operate under what they would be operating under if bylaw passed town meeting, I think you should look to change the charge, which, you know, they had a suggested document in your packet.
yeah, I guess my opinion on that is I just as soon have one document that we're focused on, one set of words, let's get that right. And if that's something that we're all comfortable of and supportive of, you know, at that time, we can revisit whether we want to make that an amended charge. But I don't think it makes sense to kind of proceed in two different directions with,
I mean, if we have issues, we
Documents
know
now.
where to find you.
yes.
And if I may, Mr. Shea, so, and also, a lot of what's in the Compliance Committee charter is actually within the document anyway. So if we're waiting to discuss this and go over this document, it doesn't make much sense to me to approve a charge here tonight when it's the exact same information that's gonna be in the warrant.
Correct. And technically, the only thing on the agenda for tonight is the warrant article request, not approval of the new charge. So that's not action that we can take tonight anyways, but not that we couldn't at a future meeting.
Thank you.
Will we be invited back next month to
Absolutely.
discuss this? Thank you.
Absolutely.
Mr. Sines, just to let you know, I've already sent the board the information for Jeff, so it's all set.
Thank you.
Thank you, appreciate you coming. Mr. Valentine, Finance Director, Transfer Station Fees.
So I guess just to set this issue up a little bit, before Brian starts, this is an issue that has been, before this board in the past. Public Works Planning Board has brought this up in the past, about the town's approach to transfer station fees. And we always seem to take it up around the time we're doing the transfer station rules and regulations, which is in the May-June timeframe, which is really a little bit late considering we just passed the budget the month before. So the last time this came up, I believe it was Mr. Shea who said, look, let's bring this issue back and talk about this at the appropriate time so we can give it some level of consideration before we get into the budget process.
Yep.
So that's kind of,
I guess even another step back.
Yeah.
This is something that we had discussed at our goal-setting meeting in August as well, that we wanted to discuss. And this goes back to past boards, but there were opinions stated that the transfer station should be funded solely through the sticker fees. There was that opinion. There was an opinion that if it is a town service, that it shouldn't be funded solely by stickers, that if it's a town service available to all, it ought to be paid by all in the tax base, the way that all other town services are. So there's different, or had been different thought processes at this board level. We're now the five of us who are the board. So we do have upcoming capital projects at the transfer station in the next several years. I don't know where we're gonna head with discussions tonight, but we could go from the extreme of, and I'm not advocating anyone, there's any number of ways that we can go. If we could be, let's get out of the trash business altogether. Let's privatize it. We could go, you know, let's include it in the tax base. Let's keep it the way it is. Let's do something in between. So we've now had the first draft budget put together, so we know what impact, you know, if we were to make the change to have it all funded through the tax base, we know what impact that will have. And I think that's what Mr. Ballantyne will be getting at. And with that, I will lead to Mr. Ballantyne.
Well, good evening. I guess you stole most of my thunder.
So,
But yeah. So I'm obviously not going to get into the policy-making decision of what's appropriate for the town. That's up to the board. I'm sure you're well aware of all the arguments and the philosophies out there regarding this. Right now in the budget, we are carrying the $400,000 roughly in transfer station revenue we typically get in a year. So we've assumed worst-case scenario. And I think the town administrator and myself, as we progress through this budget, obviously we'll need to refine that and get some direction on where the board wants to go with it. This could be a very quick discussion tonight if the board decides not to move beyond point A, which is, obviously, if you don't want it funded within the tax rate, there's really nothing more to talk about, at least immediately. Obviously, you could make changes during the spring, but that would be I guess type A. The first decision you could make is, do you want to move forward at all? Or suppose you could say you need more discussion, more research on it, and let us know at a later date, not too much later. The 17th, I believe it is, of October is our budget meeting with, where we're going to be presenting more detail on this. December, I'm sorry. And advisory committee is also well underway with meeting with departments and the budgets. So as you know, with this compressed schedule, it makes things a little more priority to make decisions as we move along. So do we have to know tonight as far as finances go? No. But we probably should know soon so we can head towards our discussion on in December, because at that time the board will be making some decisions to support or not support some of the budgetary items that have come up this year. They're fairly substantial. So $400,000 is a lot of money. It's about 1% on the tax rate. And again, I'm not here to decide the policy. I don't even want to be a part of that. But trash is a funny issue. But it just wanted to start the discussion and see where the board wanted to go. If they just, again, if they want to go, if they're interested in tackling this issue and they think it has merit, then we should at least have a discussion about it. If they're not, again, we could just move on, and we'll put that revenue back in the budget as part of our consideration. So I'll leave it up to the board how they want to kind of go forward.
All right, who wants to start this? Ms. Braccio.
All right, I'll jump right in. Thank you, Brian. My first question is, has advisory discussed this and taken a position one way or the other on this?
I am not aware that they've taken up the issue, and I'm not aware of any decisions they've made.
Okay, because I did send Ms. Cook a note, and I didn't hear back from her today, so I just didn't know.
Nothing as of yet.
I would think, Ms. Bracha, that you would want to take the lead as the board on this one, and then decide where you'd like to go, and then get advisory's input. So in other words, kind of not necessarily make the decision, and then let advisory know, but kind of set the path. And then before you take the step, check and see where advisory is on that piece. And
No, agreed, but it's just always good to know if a discussion's taking place somewhere outside of here.
process, yeah.
So, also, Brian, as we enter into this, and you probably don't have any idea, and I don't know if Ms. Galligan has any idea, seeing as this has been discussed for a while, do we know to take the step if the board decided to go down to privatize it? Do we have any idea of what those costs are? And I don't mean to put you on the spot, but again, I think we need to kind of look at the whole picture here.
To privatize in terms of the actual transfer station, have someone come in and take care of that and try to make it more of a business?
Well, both. Okay, well,
I've
that's
looked at
one.
that, but
Okay,
we didn't have any grabs.
okay.
But it didn't go out as a full-on bid. I mean, that would have to go out differently. As far as, so I did meet with my advisory liaison today, and I think they are going to talk about it a little bit
Okay.
next week.
Yep.
When I'm in at advisory. But one of the things where, which is kind of pushing the discussion at this point, besides the Public Works Planning Board had, in 2015, had come up with the concept of putting it into the tax rate, is the fact that, as Selectman Shea said, that we've got some capital coming up because it's just kind of old and tired.
Yep.
We have a plan that is a totally functionally operational plan. Whether or not that's what the town wants is really where we need to determine at this point. So the Public Works Planning Board, the last time they met, their vote was more to, let's see what happens this coming year, rather than necessarily support it. They didn't go against their own vote or for their own vote. They said, let's see what happens with the money in the budget. But what we do have in the budget is warrant article or money for capital to actually have a company come and look and do some charrettes and try to really get a feel, because we have a master plan going, but the master plan is more on development. We're not really looking at the services as much in the town. You know, we have a lot of people who say, oh, it'd be great to have this and this and this at the transfer station, and I kind of look at them and I say, that's really something that means you want a community center, not a transfer station.
Right.
So that kind of thing, so whether people want to just wait on the subject, which is sort of what had come up at one point was, and what was the Public Works Planning Board's point was, is maybe we wait, we don't actually try to pull all that money out of the budget yet, do another year of permitting till we see what actually the town wants to go to, and then we figure out how we pay for that.
But I think I think the larger discussion needs to happen as we're having it, and maybe broadens a little bit to Mr. Shea's, range of options, because, we do have some capital improvements. The hopper's getting tired.
Yep.
We're gonna have to replace that. I don't know if
People might want to change the pickup.
If DEP is gonna want us putting a new one back in the ground, or they're gonna prefer that be above ground, and how that's going to be addressed. So there are some things that I think are precipitating, the conversation beyond simply the fees as to how do we structure, what do we want to do, and as Ms. Galligan just pointed out, is the transfer station more about community and a place to go for certain things in the absence of another area to do that? Is it more about that than it is about trash?
Yeah. Okay, well, I had some numbers pulled today as well. Single-family homes in town, there's 2,868 single-family homes in town per the assessor. And I assume this sheet that we have in our packet was done in 2018. So I assume there's a little fluctuation in that. There's new homes that have been built and whatnot.
Yeah, those numbers would have been from older than that, but yeah, my 2018 numbers are about that. Now, Madison Place, anybody can buy a permit, so you could get Fay School and St. Mark's. Those houses aren't included in the single families usually.
Okay.
Also not included is NECC, anything that they took off the rolls. Or actually, no, those aren't included because those aren't single family anyway. But, so a lot of the numbers I use have Madison Place, but don't have Fay and St. Mark's. We really don't have New England Center for Children. So when it comes down to it, we report about 3,600 families, so that's in multifamily or whatever. However, that does include Madison Place, and it does include New England Center for Children, and they have other outlets.
Well, where I was trying to go was, I was trying to figure out where is the best place to put this? Is it in the tax rate? So I figured at this, we'll use the 2,800 homes just as an example, because that was what I had gotten. And if there's the 1,733 permits are issued, is that actual first, second, and third permits, or is that a household?
We actually have 2,400 households this year.
Okay.
Which is.
So it's a household
that's a
permit, it
household.
doesn't matter whether they have one or they have three. Okay, so if we use the 2,800 number, and then, does that include, the
That includes-
2,400 includes seniors?
Yes.
Okay, so you're looking at roughly the same thing I came up with. I came up with 443 households are not using or don't have a sticker for the transfer station.
Correct.
And at the 2,400 number, it's within 20 anyway.
Yeah.
So, I kind of view this as, there are a lot of people that live in town that don't have kids in the school system. They pay taxes. There are people that may not use the senior center. They pay taxes. There are people that kids don't use recreation. They still pay taxes. But what these people do pay for, obviously, is a transfer station. So in looking at weighing the odds for me, I really think that this is an important discussion, and I would not necessarily be against moving forward at some point. I have some changes on this document, but I think this is probably a good way to go, because my only one big concern was, if you are going to increase the taxes and put it in the tax base, I would never support $25 for a senior, because you're already raising their taxes. So this would be like a double dip, in my opinion, for the seniors as well, that may be on fixed incomes. So one of the things I had also done was, I was curious how many towns are actually in the trash business. So there's actually the DEP puts out a great little guide, and one of the things I wanted to do was, because this seems to come up an awful lot since I've been on the board and before I came up on the board, the transfer station, it's a hot button topic. People feel strongly one way or the other. There's really no gray area in this. And I was just curious how some of the other towns, and that was one of the things I wanted to research. So I personally wouldn't be willing to support anything on this tonight, because I would like to take the opportunity to reach out to some of these towns and find out how they do it. Do they do it via a sticker? Do they fund it through the budget? I just kind of like to get an idea, because obviously it's worked in other places as well. So,
Yeah, and it varies greatly, because you go from pickup that the town picks up, you have pickup with contractors, you have enterprise pickup, you have tax-based pickup.
well, this is pretty comprehensive. It talks
Yeah.
about the
Transfer
transfer station
stations.
specific, and whether it's a municipal transfer station, and then if it is municipal, who's actually, is it a private third party that's, running the transfer station? So it's a great document, but I would just, I'd be happy to share it with the board, but I would also like the opportunity to kind of research this a little bit more. I don't think it's a bad direction to go in, seeing as 2,400 households in the town are currently using it at this point in time anyway. And in my view, it is a service, just like the senior center, the recreation, the fields, and whatnot. It almost feels like a segment of our population is being almost, I don't want to use the word discriminate, because that's not it, but they're being forced to carry an extra burden. So that's kind of my initial thoughts right off the bat, is I'd like to see some additional analysis. I'd also like to know maybe what the cost would be. If people are concerned, I'd like to maybe know what the cost would be to bring in a private hauler to do it as well. Not that I'm going in that direction, but again, it's just being able to give the public all the information we can give them, so they see what we're basing our decisions on.
Yep.
So, thank you.
Mr. Stivers?
Thanks. I've been interested in this for some time, in various capacities. I think it's useful to sort of look back and see, what we've done in terms of analysis on this. This is, I think, a fairly complex set of issues here. And it sounds like there are a lot of numbers that are a little bit fluid at this point, questions about, how we're counting various things. The last study that I'm aware of was done by the Public Works Planning Board in 2014 and issued in January of 15, I think. And there's a lot of stuff that's happened since then, particularly relative to recycling costs. So I think that the data that we've been basing some of this stuff on is in need of some updating. And Public Works Planning Board did vote in April, as Ms. Galligan suggested, to actually hold with what we have in terms of the current prices and review it again in a year, given the budget process. And so the recommendation is to sort of stay with what we have, at least that's the current recommendation. And it seems to me that there's a substantial opportunity for somebody to take a hard look at this and consider options and so forth. I think that, frankly, is what the Public Works Planning Board has been tasked to do typically. And I think this would be a great project for the Public Works Planning Board to take a look at a variety of options, starting from, should we be in this business at all? What are the economics?
And that's part of what that warrant article would be working with the
Are there
Public
other
Works
ways
Planning Board.
of doing this? That's right. And to look at recycling economics and, again, a variety of options here. I think that if that happens, I think Public Works Planning Board ought to work with Mr. Ballantyne and maybe a representative from advisory to make sure that a variety of interests are involved in terms of a fairly rigorous financial analysis of the options, and then come up with some options and recommendations for how we move forward. Because again, I think that there are some interesting choices relative to future capital costs at the transfer station. I think we ought to be looking at what do we think that's likely to be, and how would we pay for that? Do we roll some of that into the sticker fee or not, et cetera, looking at various ways of financing this. And also, as Ms. Braccio is suggesting, I think there's some interesting models in terms of how other towns are doing this. And so we could, I think, learn some things about, how much transfer station capacity do we need, for example, and therefore, what's it going to cost, and what do we think about other ways of structuring this? So it seems to me, again, it's overdue for a detailed analysis. I think we've got a group that's supposed to be doing these things, and I would suggest we think about tasking the Public Works Planning Board to do this with a fairly short timeline, because I think it would be great to get some input in time for some sort of a report for town meeting at the end of March, and I think that's a manageable process if people get busy and start working on it.
Ms.
I just,
Gallagher.
and it's not that I disagree with you, however, well, I do. So I disagree with you.
That's okay.
You're looking at it as a financial decision.
No, not
And
totally.
in all my days, I have not seen anything about the transfer station that is strictly a financial or practical decision.
Nope, I'm not suggesting that, Ms.
No,
Gallagher. think
no,
it's a
but
broad set
my
of
point
issues.
is that if we have a warrant article for town meeting, it's for somebody to come in to do charrettes, to make sure we actually pull that really, really underrepresented and extremely quiet group that we have in town, because the unheard majority is huge in this town. I would say we hear from maybe 500 people at best out of 10,000, which granted, there's probably maybe 8,000 of those can vote. There is probably an upsurge for people who are like, I would rather have pickup. There is probably a bunch of people who say, you know what, I really like the transfer station exactly the way it is. There's people who are gonna say, can we do something sort of in between? I think if we're really gonna put any money into this, and we tend to, as a town, sometimes, we had a great facilities plan at one point, and I know it kind of got really attacked, and that was not at all good, but the reality is when you have these plans, we don't have anything currently that we're all working off of. So it's sort of like, as things happen, we knee-jerk react, and we Band-Aid this, or, okay, great, we're doing a master plan, but that's on development, it's not on the services. It's not on, what do we want to do with, what do people want to see? Great, they want a Starbucks. Well, they got a Starbucks. Okay, now they want something downtown. Okay, great, maybe we get something downtown. How do we get there? How do we walk there? Okay, great, you're gonna talk about sidewalks and all that. That's wonderful. Is there any kind of spot that we can have, like, people can go and actually enjoy that in an area and watch kids play sports, or what, like, none of that is being looked at as a big grouping of what services, and it gets back to the facilities plan. You know, are we investing money in a transfer station that everyone's like, you know what, I don't even want to bring my trash in my car. Can we please just stop doing that? And I don't know if that's what people want or don't want, but I do think we haven't asked that question in the 20 years that I've been here.
I'm not suggesting we not do that.
No, but that's what I'm saying, but rather than try to get all our money put in order by town meeting, it seems to me that we'd be better off taking town meeting to try to engage people, understanding that there's you know, gonna be money to do these charrettes and do these things that then can get everyone to weigh in. It would be done through the Public Works Planning Board as the group that would kind of be overall monitoring it, because there's no other real group to do that, but then come up with some suggestions at that point. I mean, that's where I see that with the 1976 Hopper, we need to be doing something, but I think we need to look at it in a more comprehensive than just, I know how to make that work better, and we could do that, and that's fine, but I'm not sure that that's really what everybody is looking to do.
I can kind of read your frustration.
Sorry.
And I guess my reaction is a little bit different and a little bit more global. I think it's more something Ms. Braccio said resonated, and that is, it's a fundamental question that I think we probably should address in the short term rather than the long term, and that is, do we view trash services as something that the town should be providing, or something that essentially goes to a user fee? My view is I'm not a big fan of user fees. I think that you make a determination as a town what town services are, and if they are town services, then the town pays for them. That's my view. And I can be dragged kicking and screaming, and have been in the athletic context, and it kind of makes sense there for some teams and things like that for there to be user fees. But generally, to me, it's a more global question. Is this something that is a town service that should be provided? And if it is, then you go down a different path. You figure out how we do that in the most economical, cost-efficient, et cetera way. That's my view of the world. I don't know if it carries the day, but that's my view of the world. And so I don't need to study to know that that's how I feel. And so the only question I would have is just what the cost would be within that option. In other words, is it more cost efficient for the town to be picking up trash? Now, having said that, quick sidebar.
Should we be contracting it out?
Or contracting it out.
Every decision, even making that big decision, there's still branches of where you go
And
from
I
there.
appreciate that. What I was going to say is, quick sidebar, if you no longer have the transfer station open on Saturday, a lot of people are still going to go there, just from reflex. Heck, Mr. Stivers, you're going to be there sitting in a chair.
Right, I love it. Yeah. Home away from home.
And that is one thing, if we ever did go to pick up, you would have to have the transfer station at least one day a week open. I don't know that you can ever get out of that fully just based on the way people need to do what you can pick up at a house and what you can't. And so it's a huge issue. And I agree, like, the issue of putting it in the taxes or not is probably the smaller of the issues at this exact moment. It's it's more a matter of to do a comprehensive necessarily study of just the money part doesn't make sense without doing a comprehensive study of the entire process.
So that leads to my next question. You've mentioned it a couple of times, and it could be fully operational, I think is one of the terms you use, and otherwise. Where is that information?
So I just have a plan that was done, basically an operational concept plan that I had put onto onto a survey. So I have that, and that sits in my office.
And what does that, is that both operational cost and?
No, it's a layout, so it's basically to build something that is operationally an equivalent to what we have, but is, more compact, a better traffic flow, and gets rid of the hopper.
You're talking about hardware, not software.
Right, it's a total operational issue.
Okay.
Physical layout.
Right.
Plan, yeah.
Okay. I mean, obviously, that's
sort of
pretty
where
important
my head
information.
goes, right?
Yeah, okay. But just generally, in terms of my view, is I think trash pickup is a service. I think is a service that a town should provide. I think Southborough is a town and should provide it and work it into the tax rate. And I mean, obviously, we've always got issues in terms of how particular expenditures impact the tax rate, and dealing with those on a transitional, so that it's not all of a sudden in 1 year. That's a logistical discussion. But the first one, in some respects, is an easy question for me, and I'll go back to what I said. It's a service. It's a town service. The town should be providing it, and we should figure out a way to do that for people.
Yeah, I didn't address that. I guess I have a slightly different view in the sense that at a high level, that I think you got to think about the spectrum of things that are truly a public good, like police, fire service, and so forth, versus a utilization-based fee. So if you've got electrical service, for example, or water service, as we do today, those fees are based on how much of that good that you use.
But, well, I'll stop you there. The water is different, though, because there are people in town that do not have a water pipe in front of their house.
Understand.
So there's no
Yep.
way that they should
Yep.
have their taxes pay for the water.
Yep.
So and that's why we adopted the enterprise fund
Yep.
for the water
Yep,
last year.
And there are bigger issues there, too, in terms of water service.
Yeah.
But again, I see this as sort of a hybrid there, and so I wind up at the position saying that it seems to me it's useful to have elements of both here in terms of some town support, but also some user-based support.
And one of the other options that was kicked around was, yes, if it's a town service, then the cost of providing the service is covered by the tax base.
Right.
And that which is a fluctuating cost, which really is the quantity of material thrown on the hopper.
Disposal
Go on a
cost.
pay-as-you-throw
Yep.
basis for
Which in
that.
fact is interesting, because if you look at the impact on the amount of trash there's a lot of data that says you can reduce that by about a third if you go to pay-as-you-throw. People do think differently about doing that. So, and again, a lot of moving parts to this, and I think that it is useful to understand conceptually first, how do we think we should approach it? Then I think you roll into the numbers and a broader view of the services that we offer.
Is any of this helpful?
This is a total town decision, this really is it's what do people want versus,
Well, I think at some point in time, we're gonna need to make a decision as to which way we're gonna proceed with the 2021 budget. And what number are we gonna plug in? And, what revenue number are we gonna plug in or not plug in? And what expense number are we gonna plug in or not plug in? So that, and knowing that it's about a 1%.
Yeah.
If there is an increase in taxes next year, whatever percentage we're looking at, if this all goes into the tax base, 1% of that is attributable to the transfer station services, so.
Right.
So I think sooner rather than later, we're gonna need to make a decision on the budget, but, the long-term solution, I don't know that we need to solve that here and now. We're not gonna solve it here and now, we know that, so.
But if we are going to look at it, does it make sense to think about getting somebody like the Public Works Planning Board started on taking a look at this stuff?
Yeah, and remind me, Karen, so the article that you are, or the money that you are moving or recommending for the 2021 budget, that would cover what again?
it would be basically almost like an engineering / planning for what to do with the transfer station in terms of, originally I was hoping just to put a spec together, but I believe we really need to do is kind of a survey, do some charrettes, or a charrette maybe, I don't know how many you have to do, and then try to get some public input into into whether people do want to do pay-as-you-throw, or do want to do pickup, or want to keep a transfer, and, based, if it's this cost, would you want to do this, or if it's this cost, you want to do that?
And that's bringing in a firm that would do this study, run the charrettes in conjunction with the Public Works Planning Board?
Right, so they would report back to the Public Works Planning Board with their findings, and they would talk to them to get a recommendation, but their report would obviously go direct to you guys also.
Yep.
But it's just, the place to vet it's tough to vet stuff as much as we've seen with other stuff.
No, I
with
think
this
that's
board.
a good approach to get a lot of the answers to a lot of the questions that were raised from our discussion so far, so.
I agree.
Okay,
Thank you, Karen.
Karen, are you leaving right after this?
I don't have to.
Well, no, it's not an agenda item, but while you're sitting there, I just want to say Main Street looks great.
Yeah, they did a great job so far, huh?
Yeah, so, and it's evened out where the bumps were.
Yes.
Vast improvement.
Yeah,
Yes.
so, nice work in whatever,
I have very little capacity to it, but thank you.
okay,
I will let
So-
them all know.
all right, thanks.
Thank you.
Sorry about that.
No worries, no worries. All right. On the transfer station issue, sure. So why don't I go right to public comment? I have not covered that item yet. Go ahead.
That's what I've been sitting here for.
Appreciate you coming. If you could just state your name and address?
Yep, Peter Lapine, 27 Parkerville Road.
Thank you.
So I read on my Southborough about this and got worked up over the potential to, increase the senior sticker fee from $0 to $25 in addition to the potential tax increase. So I wanted to voice my concerns over that.
Mhm.
I lived in a town before moving to Southborough that did have municipal pickup, and that worked pretty well. So it was built into the taxes. I don't know what percent paid for that, but a truck came by every week and picked up. And initially they had, it was wide open. My neighbors across the street recycled nothing. They put out 6 or 7 trash cans a week. I put out one with a little basketball-sized bag in it and, a couple recycle bins. Eventually they went to a model where everybody gets 2 bins, and that's it. And if you have more trash than fits in one bin, you pay more. You get billed for it or something, so that's a potential if this town decides to go municipal. I'm puzzled over the sticker issue, or how it's handled here. Everybody pays the same fee. If I have a commercial business in town and get it, if I live in the town and own a business, I can buy a sticker for the same.
Private businesses can't, right? It's residents only.
No commercial trash, in theory, that's the regulation.
If I'm a home builder and I'm a resident, can I take my construction debris?
No,
Not
If you-
theoretically.
no. If you're a home builder and you live in town, you can take your home trash to the transfer
But
station.
you're not supposed to take your
You're not
business
supposed to take
generated.
your business trash.
Okay, but what polices that? Nothing, right?
If you could just go to a microphone, please, Karen.
We do police that. If we see someone dumping a lot of debris, because if you're a homeowner, so you yourself say you're tearing apart your toilet and if we see a lot coming in, we'll look and check to see if there's a building permit and if it's taken out in you or a builder. And if it's a builder, we'll generally send you a warning. If we see a builder's company come and do it and we see a lot of trash going in and we say that's clearly something they get fined a $250 fee, and they'll get fined as many times as they come in, that we see it. And we have cameras. So, and we see the stuff in there, so it usually comes after the fact. I'm not saying that people don't, if you have a fence and you break up your fence, that's a lot of wood waste, but you broke up your own fence. We're not gonna charge any kind of construction, you're not gonna get fined for that. It's your house.
How many fines do we do in a year, roughly?
I actually had that from the other day.
Like 2 or 3 or 50 or?
Oh, no. We have at least probably in the realm of actually get money back for that they don't get waived. We probably have 10 that come through that way. We probably send at least 30 to 40 out a year. And, but we mostly send warnings to residents saying, you forgot to get a sticker. Can you please get a sticker? You keep forgetting to get a sticker. Geez, you dumped a lot of stuff and you don't have a sticker. So, but we try to be fairly fair to the residents.
Thanks.
See, for the pay-as-you-throw thing, how would we control that? Is that by weight?
Other towns who do it actually sell bags at various stores around, and so you buy a bag for $5 or $2 or whatever it is, and then you can throw away whatever you can get in that bag, so you can buy as many bags as you want.
And that's the only bag that's allowed to be thrown away. So all the trash has to go into that.
And if you have
That
beyond
bag.
that, you pay more, is that correct?
You buy
just
more
buy more
bags.
bags.
Yeah.
So you buy more bags?
Yeah. So,
You throw away 10 bags a week, then you pay for 10 bags a week. If you only throw away 1 bag, then you just pay for the 1 bag. So,
Because some people generate a lot of trash,
right.
but everybody pays the same price for a sticker.
Yep.
I throw a basketball size and everything else goes into recycle, but some
Today.
people have,
Right.
it's obviously one of the many components that needs to get worked out with this.
yeah, it sounds, I mean, we already have sort of a hybrid model because taxes pay for part of the transfer station.
Exactly.
But then
Yep.
everybody who wants to go there themselves has to buy a sticker too, so,
Correct.
So that's today's model, right?
yeah, okay. All right, that's all I have, thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Mr. Litt.
Tim Litt, Woodland Road. I hate to be a frequent flyer. I want to go back to the ADA committee thing. I don't speak for the committee, but I was responsible for drafting the document and for the language that's in it. So I just want to say that I'd be happy to talk with Mr. Healy, Mr. Purple, and/or Town Council, if that would be helpful in terms of understanding why what's in there is in there, and if I can help perfecting it, I'm more than happy to do that.
Appreciate it. Great. Any other public comment? All right, we'll move on to Town Administrator report.
Mr. Chairman, just a couple of issues for tonight. I think we've already covered the budget. So obviously, Mr. Valentine and I will be coming back to the board on December 17th to get the board's input on some of these new initiatives, new positions that some of the departments have requested this year. I think Mr. Valentine alluded to, we have kind of a heavy capital budget. There are some items that have been put off for a couple of years that continue to come forward. and there's some things that we have put off that needs to be done, a couple of library items, I believe, that are on that list. So those are things that we'll do for you on the 17th. If you came in tonight and didn't go right up the stairs, but actually came into the main floor, you will notice the new accessible countertops that have been put in on the first floor at all the departments. Those were a project that has been over a year in the making. Facilities has been spearheading that, along with the State Prison Wood Shop, who had custom built all of those countertops for us. I think they add a nice touch. They do visually take a minute to get used to, because, you know, they're just so different from what we've had. You know, Brian shaking his head over there, you know, he's been pleased with them. I think they did a real nice job with them. They had the input of Brian's department, clerk's department, selectman's office, to make sure they got everything that we were looking for. Also gave us the ability to now have computer monitors and things right at the counters, so we can help to, you know, take care of some of those service issues right at the counter when people come in, rather than having staff go back to their desk and do the work and then come back. I think it helps with efficiency. So kudos to facilities for getting that done. Again, it was more than a year in process for getting that to happen. I think everything looks nice. Received a notice today from the MMA that we have received an award for our town report. The town report contest. Each year we do our town report. We submit it to MMA to be part of their contest. Each year we get a thanks for participating. You were not selected. This year we've received an award. Will be given at the MMA meeting on the Saturday of the annual meeting in January. I'd like to give kudos to Lori Esposito. This is kind of her baby that she you know, takes cradle to grave every year. Does a real great job with it. So it is nice to get some recognition for that on a statewide level. So kudos to her for the work that she does on that. And the one other item I had, again, we've had budget discussions with many of the departments. We're just about, I think, wrapped up in the discussion with the police this year. A conversation with the police chief following the discussion. His contract is coming up in February, his renewal. And I wanted to bring that to the board's attention and kind of gauge how the board would like to proceed with the initial discussions with the chief. In the past, a member has met with him to discuss parameters of what he's kind of looking for in a new contract. You've also, there's been times where you've asked me to have those discussions to see where they're at. I just wanted to give you the opportunity to kind of gauge what you'd like to do and how you'd like to do the process, you know, with the chief. I don't need an answer this evening. It is something you can mull over, kind of like trash. It's not, there's a lot of different answers, but.
And I would just state, if the chief is watching, the hesitancy is in no way, shape, or form reflective of not wanting to continue with a contract.
No, for me, is I've got the, how many of us can be in the room with them question with
Exactly.
the
Exactly.
guidance
I
we
know
got
it's-
from the Attorney General's
I know
office,
that.
so.
Yeah,
I know that, so,
Yeah.
all right.
I mean, Brian, can I make a suggestion? I
Yep.
mean, I think there are a couple of ways one could approach this. One is, as Mark suggests, talking to the chief about, you know, what are you interested in doing? Second is, we could actually come up with a proposal to say, what do we think makes sense here to have a baseline to start with? So I don't know how we've done it in the past, but one can approach it two ways. I mean, generally, in my day job, I start with, you know, here's what I think makes sense here, and then talk to folks to see if that lines with what they're thinking about. But again,
And you can always, you know, if the board would like to do this as a board, you can schedule an executive session for, with the chief to, you know, to have those conversations. I just didn't know whether you wanted to preliminarily do anything or have at least some parameters or some idea of the scope of the discussion before you got into the discussion. But it's up to the board if you'd like to do it as, you know, as the full board all the way through as well. That's an option as well.
I guess my view is let me think about it.
Sure.
All right,
I second that.
Okay.
all right, so we'll revisit that and include that as a discussion topic for our next meeting, which will be next week. So we've got some holidays and holiday time in between, so it'll be on us quickly. Anything else?
That's it, Mr. Chairman.
Purple?
Yep.
Thank you. Chairman's report. I first wanted to start with a bulleted item on the agenda under Chairman's report. And just note that on October 25th, the Attorney General sent a decision letter to our board with its decision on open meeting law complaints relative to the timeliness of approval of meeting minutes. The AG's letter is included in our packet for the meeting. As chair of the board, I want to publicly acknowledge the letter. I believe all at the table tonight take this matter seriously. The AG required that our board attend a training session on November 20th on open meeting law compliance. All board members attended. In addition, I had asked Mr. Purple that he and all administrative staff who are involved in meeting minute preparation attend that training session as well, and they all did. As required by the AG, we sent a letter to the AG stating our compliance with the action noted in its October 25th letter. What happened, and it should not have. It's not my intent to assign blame. The time period over which meeting minute approvals were lacking spans many years and spans many present and past board members, all of whom I hold in high regard, all of whom I know have served this town with distinction, honor, and honesty. While the AG's finding is what it is, to disparage any past or present board member as part of this process is, in my opinion, inappropriate. It's also inappropriate to disparage any staff members as part of this. As chair of the board, I will take ultimate responsibility for it and note that it's incumbent on all to be diligent, making sure it doesn't happen again. In addition to the training session that we attended, we have taken other internal actions since receiving the letter. The AG's letter contains a table of our meetings, the dates minutes were approved, and an indication if action on the minutes was timely or untimely. As follow-up action, Mr. Purple and I have created a spreadsheet listing all of our board meetings this year, continuing from the date that the table in the AG's letter ended. That exercise identified 2 executive session meetings from earlier this year for which action was required, and action on those items was taken at our board at a meeting several weeks ago. With action on 2 November meetings that are on our agenda this evening, the table that we've put together reflects that we'll be fully up to date for action on minutes for this year. I've requested that this table be maintained and continuously updated moving forward as a means to ensure that we stay current. A lot of comments have been made about this matter, and people in town need to know that the board is taking the matter seriously and that we're taking actions beyond that required by the AG to be sure this does not repeat. We don't beat our chests at our meetings when the AG decisions are made in our favor, but in those instances where decisions aren't in our favor, we own it, and we take the action prescribed by the AG. With this matter, we're doing that and more. And if any other board member would like to speak, I would welcome you to do so now.
I'll just weigh in very quickly. I agree with everything you've said. And it's not directly related to this, but I think it would be useful, and it doesn't have to happen at our next meeting or the meeting after that. But at some point, I mean, what you've just described in terms of the steps that are being taken, I was aware of some of those, but not all of them. I think it'd be useful to have a sort of public discussion to make sure that we're all aware of them and that we're all comfortable with steps that are taken. Because again, it's a big deal. Things like that shouldn't happen. They do. You know, responsibility lies with the Board of Selectmen, and you know, all we can do is deal with it going forward, and I expect that's going to happen.
I would just like to thank you, Brian, for that statement. I thought it was very well put together. I also was on the board during some of those, and I can say that there was no intent to do anything wrong. Mistakes were clearly made, and this board does own them, and this board has never had a problem owning any time there has been a mistake. So moving forward, we're going in the right direction. Things are being done as they should be done, and I would hope that the public would take confidence in that, and in knowing that when a mistake is made, the board is not afraid to stand up and say we made a mistake and we've taken steps to correct it. So I would hope that's what the public takes out of this as well. Thank you.
Brian, I'd add also that I think that it's good that steps are being taken to mitigate those particular problems. I think that it's also potentially worth looking more broadly at some of the causality for what happened. I think that if in fact you understand where some of the missteps were taken, then that might lead to policies that reinforce here's how we need to address these things going forward. So, in fact, we're less likely to fall into the same traps going forward. So, to me, there's a process issue there that's worth understanding, as well as I think the spreadsheet's a great idea to keep track of where we are in various things. I'd also think that it might be an interesting exercise to broaden the perspective a little bit, because there are a lot of other boards out there who are responsible for getting minutes out. I think the town clerk has now got a database that is pretty comprehensive, and if there are other boards that have gaps in those minutes that we appoint, I think it's our responsibility to, again, work with those boards, give them the tools they need to comply with what the regulations are, and to monitor that before something else happens with another board and creates a problem in this same area. So I think, again, proactively, it's worth broadening our look to make sure that we're appropriately comprehensive in understanding who's out there. So my thoughts. Thanks.
Thank you. The other items that I just wanted to touch upon, I touched on it earlier, but a reminder that the warrant for the annual town meeting is open, but will be on our agenda to close at our meeting on December 17th. That's just 2 meetings from now. A couple topics that I know that we need to discuss if we do want to have placeholder articles. First is an administrative thing that I had talked to Mr. Purple about a while ago, is to consider extending the time that board and committee members have to be sworn in. There's a number of people that we had to put on agendas, over the summer, and many times with vacation conflicts, people just didn't have the time. And I think it would be good to give a broader window for that. Local meals tax is one of the options that we had discussed. Considering including another discussion on that again on the 17th of December, but we'll need to decide whether or not we want to include a placeholder for that. On our next meeting agenda, there will be discussion on adopting the thickly settled speed limit regulations that we had touched upon for with the Pine Hill Road discussion. So that will be upcoming.
Both of the options for that, or just the thickly settled? There was a safety zone option as well as a thickly settled option there, 2 parts of state law.
Karen? I don't know off the top of my head whether they're both covered.
Might be
in
worth
that.
discussing, yeah, so, thanks.
Yep. And just an update from the goal-setting meeting that we had. It's been about 3 months since we had that meeting, and one of the items that we all agreed was important to have was to have periodic updates from the various boards and committees. So, since the August meeting, we have met with EDC, Council on Aging, Recreation, Personnel Board, Board of Health, Public Safety Building Committee, Cable Committee tonight, Library tonight. We've had an update from Town Council, and the next Town Council update is scheduled for December 17th. I'm hoping we can at least do quarterly updates there. So we have been making progress with that, and we'll be coordinating with Mark to continue those meetings with other boards and committees throughout the year as well. So we are making progress on that, and we had the discussion on the transfer station tonight, so starting to check off all the items that we had from the goals meeting. So that's all I had.
Brian, if I may just ask a question for the meeting on the 17th with the meals tax.
Yep.
Is there a way that we can invite some of the business owners that would be affected by that to come to the meeting? I'd be interested. I've spoken to a couple, and they were more than willing to come in, so maybe we can extend through Mr. Purple an invitation to, it's not that long of a list, so I would appreciate that. Thank you.
And I think EDC was looking for an update at that meeting as well, correct?
Correct.
So we could overlap with them and their opinion on the meals tax as well at that same meeting. Mr. Healy?
Yeah, I have two things. Number one, Karen, in the last 10 days or so, I've had conversations with a couple of people who live on Main Street. And you know, appreciate the fact that their street is going to look a lot better than it did and it does right now in the near future. But it's a perspective, and you know, I'm sort of kicking myself, having been, you know, so deeply involved in the Main Street stuff, for not having a greater appreciation for this. And that is, the town is benefiting incredibly and will benefit incredibly from the Main Street project. There's no question about that. The people on Main Street are bearing the burden, and there's no question about that. They're bearing a much larger burden than anyone else. And a frustration has been expressed to me, and I'd like to think there's a way we can address it, that when things happen as a result of the construction, and things are going to happen, and I understand that it's not a town crew, but they don't know who to contact. And I think a very simple thing, I think in some respects the least the town could do for these folks who are being burdened by this project is to have somebody, and obviously we're closing up shop for the winter if we haven't already, we're about to, but to have a person designated so they know that if there's an issue, this is the person they call. Because they've just, people have expressed to me that they've, and again, nobody's doing anything wrong, it's just there's sort of not an institutional process that we put in place for, this is it's almost an ombudsman. This is the person who you call, and they'll be responsible for contacting whoever needs to be contacted, talking to whoever needs to be contacted, and getting back to them. And I don't want to put this on you, because obviously you've had, I mean, you know, you're running the Department of Public Works. But if we can think about, we don't have to decide it tonight, obviously, but we can think about having a person designated so that the folks, again, who are bearing the burden of this project know that there is a telephone number, a person they can call when they have, you know, a water main was struck, or, you know, some particular thing relating to their property, that they know who it is they call in the town, who can then deal with the state, the feds, whoever the heck is responsible for the problem. So that's number one. And number two just has to do, I didn't get to the ethics presentation, but I watched it on tape. And I don't know if other folks were there or have watched it on tape, but there was about a 5-minute segment that dealt with special municipal employees. And virtually everything the person from the State Ethics Commission said about special municipal employees, including turning to the volunteers who were sitting there and saying to them, I hope all of you are special municipal employees, was consistent with the policy that this board adopted, which is we're dealing with volunteers. We don't want to have them have to give up their livelihood or part of their livelihood because they are willing to volunteer for the town. And it was really nice to hear the individual from the Ethics Commission to punctuate that. So it made me feel good about what we did.
Very good. Anybody else?
I have continued to attend a variety of meetings related to the downtown issues, and EDC, Planning Board, Zoning Board, et cetera. And one of the things that, Brian, you mentioned our goal-setting meeting, one of the things that came out of that, I thought was an agreement that we were going to try to get together with the appropriate parties who are involved in that to provide some opportunity for discussion, decision-making, leadership in terms of what the Board of Selectmen would like to see happen down there, that provides a way to move forward in a more coordinated way, because we seem to be having a number of conversations in the individual boards that are not, I would say, perfectly aligned at this point. So if we could provide some input to that, I think that could be very helpful. And related to that, I think that it would be a great idea if we actually could have another revisit of that meeting to reassess where are we with some of those things. Do we have different views on what we want to lay out for the next 6 months or so here? I think that would be very helpful if we could schedule that at some point too.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thanks. Consent agenda. I am going to recommend that we deal individually with B, I, and J.
I have
Are
a
there any
question
other
about
items?
I have a question about D.
We
As in
can
David.
hold D. Then I will move that we approve A, approval of regular session minutes, November 5th and November 12th, 2019. Item C, appoint Isabel Murphy to Scholarship Advisory Committee, term 6/30/22. F, approve winter parking ban 2019-2020. G, accept donation of $100 from Mr. Lawrence Hamilton for deposit to the library donations account. H, for the one-day beer and wine license applications for the dates as noted. Is there a second? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, those pass unanimously. Item B, I just wanted to acknowledge David McKay and all the work that he has put into the Economic Development Committee. He was on that committee from the very beginning, spent a number of years as the chair of that group. He put a lot into that. So it's with regrets that I will move that we accept the resignation letter of David McKay, but want to thank him for his many years of service and also hope that he's not a stranger to town boards and committees, and hopefully is able to join in some other capacity moving forward.
Second the motion and everything that was said with it.
And the one thing that I'll add is I agree completely, and before becoming a member of this board and since have both observed Mr. McKay in his volunteer capacity and worked with him, and he's always been terrific. The one thing I hope that his decision to not continue on the EDC was in fact entirely driven by his own concerns about optics, and not, unfortunately, some of the things that were said at our public meetings that clearly could have been considered a criticism of the fact that he was serving on the EDC. I don't think that criticism was appropriate. It certainly was not deserved, and again, I hope that was not a factor in Mr. McKay's resignation.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. I add my thanks to him for his service as well. Thank you.
So, all those in favor?
Aye.
Item B.
Aye.
Passes unanimously. Mr. Stivers, item D.
Question about item D. I'd like to be sure I understand what the plan is for this. This is to spend some money on the design for the drainage there, stormwater, as I understand it. Is that correct, Mr. Purple?
Yes.
And
That's within, so if you look at the letter from Mr. Davis,
Yep.
it's within the town meeting funds of that 19,270 that was
Yep.
voted.
Yep. But obviously, there's been a lot of conversation about this one, and my understanding at a high level, I'm not an engineer, is that the water coming off the hill there originally was supposed to go into the field as the detention basin. And it looks to me from the plan that the current plan is to basically build a trench around the uphill side of the field, down the side of it, and collect the water, and I don't know where it's going to send it, but hopefully there's a appropriate capacity. So is this something that there's been some engineering work done on it to say, yes, this is a feasible solution, and we know we're going to spend the money in the right direction here? Or is this something that has some potential of you do the design study and somebody says, oops, we don't have, we can't dig a big enough trench there to dissipate the water coming off the hill?
No, this is something that has been engineered, and now the construction documents are being prepared to see if, we can put this out to bid and come within, what we're estimating is the full, is the cost of the project.
So who did the engineering on this? We had a consultant that did it, or DPW did it, or?
So I will say that I am not fully prepared to speak to a lot of the details of that. Obviously, you just lost half of the resources when Ms. Galligan left the room.
Yeah, okay.
She had been helping to shepherd this, but now Mr. Davis has taken over. He could probably speak best to it. Unfortunately, we don't have anyone here tonight to speak to it.
Are you confident that there is a high enough probability that this is going to work now based on the engineering work that's gone into it, or are we still exploring?
In the brief conversations I've had with Mr. Davis about this, he has confidence in this and that, but I have not looked into this enough to give you an answer on my own.
Okay, all right,
So,
thanks.
if
I
the-
will
if-
follow up on it, but I don't
like
want
I
to
said, I
delay
mean,
the
if the board wanted to hold off, the one thing that was said when this came forward and Rec Commission agreed is that at each step along the way, they would come back to this board
Right.
and just say, okay, we've done this, and now we want to move forward to this, and we just want to make sure that, you understand where we are and everyone's in agreement as we go forward with it. So I'm happy to, if you'd like to, I'm not sure if Mr. Davis is available. I know the Rec Commission is meeting the same night we are next
Oh,
week.
okay.
And I don't know how timely this is. I do know that CPC, I think, has approved the construction funding
Okay.
for Calander,
Right.
if I've understood this correctly. So that's something that's going to be coming forward.
I don't want to hold up the process, and
Sure.
I'll follow up independently, but I think it's useful to understand that we all believe it's going to work, because in the past, it hasn't seemed to.
No, and I think, and just to clarify, the water coming down off of the hillside, there is existing, water control measures
Exactly.
in that hillside,
Yep.
as well as coming down, as well as once you get down to the edge of the field, there's that ring, around the field. I don't think that those systems are working properly, so I think that there needs to be, the engineering work, needs to include updating or improving upon what is already there.
I've heard that, but on the other hand, I think some of that property is Sulph property, and so there were issues in terms of getting access
Further up it is,
to that
yes.
property. So
Yep.
anyway, a lot of moving parts to that one as well. I'll follow up on that one, but I just want to be sure that.
Okay. I will,
looks like
I'll
it'll
make,
work.
I'll make Mr. Davis aware of your questions, so he can be prepared.
Thanks.
Is there a motion?
Yeah, I'm comfortable with the submission. I move to I'm trying exactly what he's asking for. To approve the request to move on to Phase 3 within the funds that have been already allocated for the project.
Moved, seconded, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, passes unanimously. Item I, the 11/15/2019 OML complaint has been withdrawn, so there's no need to take action on that.
I thought there was a change of direction on that, was there not?
There was a new complaint, and that will be discussed at our December 3rd meeting. But
Oh,
this
okay.
11/15 complaint has been withdrawn.
Okay.
So there's no need to take action on that. And item J, I'd move to hold this. I just want to publicly acknowledge and recognize Harvard University for the payment of $23,760. It's a good sum, and I think ought to be recognized, and thank you to Harvard University. With that, I'll move that we accept the donation.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any other matters?
I move to adjourn.
Second.
Move second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Passes unanimously. Thank you.